This one is mostly geared towards my young people, my young men, even young ladies, because even though as older people, the older generation is less likely to crash out because of the lessons that we learn, not to say that all of the older people, not to say that this doesn't apply to older people. So if it applies to you, then you know to whom be concerned, because we have lessons that we still need to learn throughout life. We have lessons that sometimes we don't get until we get older. But for the most part, our younger generation is more likely the ones that fall into this category. And I myself had to learn this lesson. Let's get into it. Choose your battles wisely. When I was younger, knucklehead, not too much of a knucklehead, meaning I wasn't like a menace to society or anything like that. I was pretty much in a monkey see, monkey do type of ordeal. I pretty much was a product of my environment. You know, I only was able to understand how I could shape myself. It wasn't until I got out of the environment and started to stretch where a lot of what it is that I talk to you guys about today, my mentality has changed and it's grown over time. But in the past, you know, especially coming up the way that I grew up, you pretty much was told certain things, you know, like as a man you can't cry, you gotta toughen up, and for the most part, you know, you gotta face every battle head on. And so just from, you know, growing up in my environment, seeing this mentality adopted all throughout my environment, the neighborhoods and stuff like that, I took on that mentality, not really knowing how to think for myself. But at the same time, when I look back, I'm like, there's a lot of those battles that I didn't necessarily have to take on. I could have chosen to opt out of some of those battles, but my ego got in the way. I could have chosen to opt out of some of those battles, but those voices in my head, pride got in the way. And so back then, I would pretty much take any battle, any challenge head on. Anybody who challenged me, I would take it head on. You know, I remember having this mentality all the way up to like my early 20s, and in a relationship with the person who I am in now, with my wife. I remember one day, now mind you, while with her in the earlier stages of our relationship, I was already adopting the mentality of trying to grow, trying to improve, trying to better myself. It was just during the early stages of my journey, right? But one day, she and we decided to stop past 7-Eleven, which is like a little mini grocery market for those of y'all who don't know what 7-Eleven is. But we was in like a little mini grocery market, and we went into 7-Eleven, and it was a guy that came in there who was pretty much making passes at, you know, my young lady at the time, you know, which is now my wife. He was making passes at her, and it was pretty blatant. But at the time, even though he was disrespectful, even though it was blatant, I was ready to crash out. I was ready to crash out. I was ready to pretty much, you know, like whatever it takes type of mentality to let him know that I'm serious about not being disrespected and stuff like that. So my mentality at the time was, this dude gotta go. But had my girl at the time, my new girlfriend at the time, did not talk to me, wasn't in my ear, I was ready, like in my mind, I was ready to crash out. I was ready to choose that battle, just like every other battle. I was ready to pretty much fend for mine, fend for my respect. I was ready to crash out. And then to what? Put myself in a situation where later on I would have to think about my actions and, you know, really ask myself, was it worth it? Which really brings me to this video, because as I mentioned to the younger communities, to the younger generation, a lot of the times, you know, we're young, so we don't necessarily always think a little bit further down the road. And that's the message that I want to share with you guys, again, even for the older community. You know, some of us still are learning those lessons. We all are at different phases and stages of growth in our life, and sometimes some of us don't get things until later in life, including myself when it came to some things. But, you know, I told myself, like I said, when I come through with these videos, I want to reach somebody in their tracks. If I could stop somebody in their tracks from crashing out or making a mistake or making any of the mistakes that I've made or have seen other people make. I come through, man. I reflect, and I come through with these videos because if I could reach anybody, man, who I can get through and stop them in their journey where they can watch these videos or watch content like this, and it don't have to be mine, just a contribution to that community, man, of support. I just want to be one of them ones that come through with a message that could potentially help someone make better decisions within the moment. And so, again, looking back, I was ready to crash out. Anybody that stared at my girl, I guess you could say, of course, I had the protector mentality. Perhaps in some ways, once again, maybe my ego got in the way and my pride got in the way. All of those things, I was willing to allow anything that came my way cause me to crash out and potentially put me in a position to where I will reflect back and realize that it wasn't worth it. That's the reason why there's so many people incarcerated right now. For the most part, I can bet you that most people that are spending a long time, 10, 15, 20 years, life sentences, were crash outs that came from minor things that did not have to happen, battles that they did not have to choose, battles that they did not have to fight over small petty stuff that put them in a situation where I'm sure a lot of them are now looking back wishing that their situation was different had they decided I'm gonna walk away. Now mind you, again, I had no other way of looking at life in ways where I saw it any way other than crashing out, any way other than being a stand-up man, any way other than not allowing anybody to disrespect me or my situation or my family, or anyone around me. Ready to crash out. But it wasn't until, matter of fact, I think she even said that to me, and I wasn't ready to listen. Even though I was on the beginning stages of my path of growth, it didn't hit me. It didn't hit me in that moment. She like, you really don't have to fight for every little single thing. If somebody stares at me, somebody look at me wrong or look at you wrong, you don't have to fight that battle. You can let it go. That's not the battle that you necessarily have to fight. And I wasn't trying to hear it in the early stages of our relationship. If you watching this video, baby, you already know. And I wasn't ready to hear it because I didn't have applied knowledge when it came to that department at that time in my life. All I went off of is what I already knew. All I went off of is what I already understood from my environments. I didn't realize that, you really don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to crash out for every situation. Like these kids today, they crashing out. And I can't say that I don't get it. I can't. When I look back on it, a lot of the times, many of us, we're like, what are you doing? Like, why are y'all kids making all of these reckless decisions? And so, to some degree, I have to give some level of grace when it comes to these kids, because a lot of the kids don't have direction. A lot of the kids are only doing what they see, copycat behaviors. They are mimicking what they see in their environment. And that is something that a lot of people may not understand, on top of the fact that when you're young, you're already gonna, make your biggest mistakes. Even if you're not in negative, toxic environments, you're likely to make your most mistakes when you're younger. When you're in your teens and when you're like in your early 20s, that is when you're likely to make your biggest mistakes. And so, if you're a teenager watching this, if you're inspired by my content, influenced by my content, or just stumbled across my video and you're thinking about crashing out, or if you're one of those individuals who just have that mentality of like, if you disrespect my situation in any given shape, fashion, or form, I'm gonna crash out. If you disrespect or violate me in any way, even if it's just a look, a negative look, you looked at me, gave me dirty looks, gave my woman dirty looks, I want to encourage you to realize that not every single battle you have to become emotional about. Not every single battle you have to actually fight, bro. You don't have to duke out every single battle. You don't have to crash out for any and every little thing. And quite frankly, real talk, if you really want to get somewhere in life, you have to choose not to crash out. You have to choose to walk away and turn the other cheek in many situations in your life. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't have a backbone. There is a time to stand up for yourself in life. I'm not saying don't have a spine. I'm saying choose wisely how you go about your battles. I'm saying if you're, let's say, being disrespected at a job or whatever the case may be, if your boss is violating you, disrespecting you, you don't have to crash out and go eye for eye, tooth for tooth. You could take it to his supervisor, his boss, just giving an example. It don't have to always be street related. It could just be, if you're not getting the proper respect that you need to get, then you have to learn the proper way to battle every situation. And in most cases, you don't have to battle at all. You can just walk away. Why is that? It's because, for one, this right here, Emotional Intelligence, which is a book that I highly recommend. You have to start learning how to operate with emotional intelligence. And I am not sponsored in any way. I'm not sponsored, and I'm not telling y'all to go get it. It's not benefiting me financially. I'm just sharing with you guys a useful tool, something that I believe can help you. Emotional intelligence. You have to have emotional intelligence out here in life to truly, truly thrive and to truly lock in on your goals, to lock in on your purpose. And once you get to a certain point within your journey where you realize how important your purpose is and everything that's connected and tied to your purpose, bro, you realize that crashing out ain't necessary. You start to realize that you have more to live for. You start to realize that you have more work to do within yourself, more work to do within your community, more work to pour into your business, more work to devote towards your legacy. And also, you got to think about your future self. You got to think about your kids. You got to think about being here with your kids and for your kids, and not putting yourself in a precarious situation just because in that moment you felt you had to fight that battle to the very end by putting yourself in a situation where now you may not be able to see your kids. You may not be able to see your kids because you're now inside of a glass, or maybe worse. You could very well put yourself in a situation where you're not even here for your kids one way or another by making a decision in a moment that could hurt you one way or another. Of course, if you find yourself in harm's way, if someone's threatening you, if your family is being threatened, if your family is in harm's way, then of course that's a battle that you have no choice but to accept. Primarily because you still want to make sure that you're here, your family's here. You want to make sure that you're doing everything possible to protect. But this part, that's about protection. This is about making sure that you and your family, your loved ones, is safe and doing what you have to do to protect yourself. But not every dog that bark, that don't mean that you have to accept the bark and get into that battle with that dog. No. Most of those issues are barks anyway. Most of the time, it's all bark. Don't bite just because someone barks. Just because someone look at your girl, bro, now it's different. I'm not saying let somebody completely violate and disrespect, walk up on her, touch her and things like that. Of course, you got to pick and choose your battles, and that's the point. But most of the things that put us in jammed situations is choosing battles that we could have avoided and should have avoided. And so this is the reason why I'm putting this message out there, because there could be someone who don't realize that they can opt out of battling and fighting and crashing out. They can choose to say, nah, I'm protecting my peace of mind. Nah, I'm protecting my sanity. Nah, I'm protecting my future self. I'm protecting my goals and my dreams, my future goals. I'm protecting my family in ways where there's sustainability and longevity to where I can be there and watch my daughter graduate or watch my son graduate and be in my family's life. So, nah, this is not a battle that I have to choose. You don't have to choose to fight every single battle, and it's okay. You have to learn to let your pride go. You have to learn to get to a point where you can walk away from a situation that just simply ain't worth it, and not allow pride or none of that get in the way. Use emotional intelligence. I highly recommend that you guys pick up this book. It continues to help me. You feel me? Sometimes I gotta reread it just to keep this is a journey. This is a journey. It's give and take. And along our journey, sometimes we have to remind ourselves. Now, mind you, this isn't regarding me at this stage. It was just something that, as I was reflecting on life, I'm like, you know what? Somebody in their journey is probably being challenged, or is going to be challenged in ways that I remember being challenged. So guess what? We're going to come through with this video because it's about uplifting and encouraging people, man, to do better, to show up for themselves, to grow, evolve, and get on that path, bro, and become better versions of themselves, being here for your loved ones, with your loved ones, being on your mission. You can't be on your mission and be a crash out at the same time, especially if you're someone who really, really wants to travel a journey and become better. I just want you to know there's no way in the world that you can play both sides. You can't be a crash out and be a person on his purpose. You can't. You got to choose one. You can't intertwine the two. It won't work. It don't work that way. And so when you lock in on your purpose, though, when you lock in on becoming better, bro, that's one of the reasons why I decided to pull myself away from all of that exterior stuff anyway, and be a person who isolated myself to find myself and learn who I was. And this is how I learned a lot of the things, many of the gems that I've dropped. I stepped away from the crowd. I had to pretty much, man, remove myself, sit myself down, read, work out, do things that was going to build myself, mind, body, and spirit. Grow, elevate, mentally, physically, spiritually. And it took for me to sit myself down and not listen to any outside noise, no outside crowd, for me to start being in tune with my own thoughts, coming to the reality of, man, had I crashed out in that situation, would I be sitting here having this conversation with you guys? Would I have evolved to the person that I am today had I chose to fight every single battle that came my way? So now, it's about moving wisely. Once you realize you don't have to choose every battle, you don't have to face every battle, it's about moving wisely. It's about operating with wisdom. This is about longevity. This is about being in a peaceful state every single step of the way. Back then, when I was in boot camp, when I joined the Navy, and I know I told this story before, but some of you guys are new to my channel, but we created a scenario where the officer was flying the plane. He was on a mission, and they was throwing socks at him. Those were supposed to be, BOMBS. They were supposed to be weapons, things like that. And instead of panicking, instead of retaliating, he stayed focused. He kept going. He stayed on his mission. He knew that he had a mission to accomplish. And so, in spite of all of the chaos that was going on around him, he never got off his path. He never stepped out of his lane. He stayed in his lane, and he fulfilled the mission accomplished. And so that's pretty much similar to this. It's like, right now you're on a mission. You want to become better. You want to become an elite version of yourself. You want to see yourself in a successful position. You want to succeed at life. And you may be challenged by your environment. My advice to you, anybody that tempts you or persuade you or do anything that knocks you off your path, you got to make some hard decisions. You got to cut some people off. You can't take everyone with you. And in all reality, while you're traveling that path, you're going to be faced with many challenges. And that's the reason why you have to operate with emotional intelligence and not take every battle as something that you have to do head on and face head on. Some stuff you can just avoid. It's not worth it. Matter of fact, I ain't even going to give it my time. I'm not going to give it no day of time. I'm not going to allow it to have any room in my head, bro. I'm not going to let it rent any space in my head. Why? Let your pride down. Leave the ego out of the equation. You know what I'm saying? Operate with wisdom and just keep growing every step of the way. You don't have to face every single battle. You don't have to fight every single battle. Pick your battles wisely. Choose your battles wisely, young man, young lady, young king, young queen, or even if you're older and you never learned it, I hope this message get through to you today. Lock all the way in, subscribe to the channel, hit that post notification bell to get more videos like this, and we appreciate all the love and support that we get. As always, do what brings life to you, and it's a great chance that you'll bring life to whatever it is that you do. These are just little simple tools, little nuggets that you're going to need along your journey in life, because again, life will throw challenges our way, and I'm just trying to encourage you to stay focused and stay sharp while you're on your mission. All right, peace and blessings. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. One love, strength.